Heidi ho, how's it go? Today we are rating and ranking the 15 studio albums of Depeche Mode. With me today is Peter Wilson, who is a musician in his own right. He put out an album in 2024 on my birthday, actually, April 5th.
Awesome.
The album is called Freedom's Door and it rocks. Thank you for joining me today, Peter.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
All right. Also, I believe you are in a band called Four Trips Ahead. Is that still the case?
That is definitely the case. Actually, just been, I think when we were trying to schedule this, I've been finishing up our new record, which is coming out with through the same label, Dr. Music, next year. So we're actually finishing track, and we're actually just doing background vocals, and then we go to mix. So it's very exciting. And I'm working also on getting ready to do pre-production and working on a new single. I'm going to be jumping in the studio again in about 3 weeks for my solo stuff. So, and then I'm working on a prog kind of thing too on the side. So, very exciting, like singing and productive times right now. So,
Oh, wow, that really is exciting. I'm really happy for you and
thanks.
looking forward to hearing the new stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to everyone hearing it too. It's been like a little quiet, but actually not so quiet. There's a lot of writing in the background. Just been playing some shows and rehearsing, and so now we're about to release a lot of stuff. Next year is going to be kind of busy for me, so that's good.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we've got 15 studio albums from Depeche Mode. But first of all, what is your previous experience with the band, Peter?
Wow. So Depeche Mode. So it's funny. And I've kind of like I've always had a wide musical palette. But growing up, there was like these camps, right? So you could be part of like the metal camp, the punk camp. Um, at the time, my father's from Jamaica, so I'm half Jamaican, and I grew up going back and forth. So I was listening to heavy roots music and even the advent of dance hall. So, and there's a lot of jazz in my house. So there was a lot going on. And I remember going to a summer camp where there were a lot of Canadian folks from Toronto and Montreal. And so they were very heavy, I guess, quote unquote, new wavers kind of. And I kind of knew some of the new wave that was more stateside. You'd hear songs here and there, but there was this one cat that had the coolest haircut, and he and I became really fast friends. And he's like, oh, and we'd share music, and he was like, hey, have you heard of this group called Depeche Mode? And I was, I think, 13, and I said, no, I don't know who they are. And so he started playing some Depeche Mode stuff, and I like totally thought it was great, weird, kind of reminded me of like Bowie in some respects, but it was kind of its own thing. It kind of sat and did its own thing. And I really loved David Gahan's voice. I thought it was so unusual, compared to everything I was listening to. So I liked it, and I think that I think the first thing I actually really owned was catching up with Depeche Mode, which is kind of the entry point for a lot of people, a collection of their earlier stuff. It was one of those things like I listened to a lot of camp, and then I think about it. I think I had a mixtape. And then I saw the album Catching Up with Depeche Mode, and I was like, and I loved all the songs. So then I went backwards and started buying everything. And then Black Celebration came out. And I remember seeing the album. I remember distinctly walking into a store in the village, and I remember they had like a bunch of like it was just Black Celebration was just up in the front, and I was like, oh, Depeche Mode. And I don't know, something about it. I didn't even come in the store looking for it, but I was just like, oh, and the guy saw me standing there. He said, oh, have you heard that yet? And I said, no. He said, oh man, you need to listen to that. And I said, oh, I know their earlier stuff. And he said, oh, and this is not like that at all in a good way. So I trusted him and I grabbed it, and that was it. That's when I probably listened to that album for like incessantly for months after that. And that's when I became a real fan. I went to go see them And then, and then that was it. I became a lifelong devotee. And it was a great period because that's when they just became really not only just huge, but they were kind of like this underground alternative thing in New York City where you hear a lot of their music. But Black Celebration to me really just like elevated the whole thing for me, and it became a really it was like that cool secret. Like I would tell my metalhead friends, I know you think you're listening to dark, heavy music, but you should check this out. And I also and it's true. It's funny. I started to realize that I don't know if this happened to you, Rich, but a lot of my friends who were like listening to music that was a little more pop, or even just like I mean, at the time MTV was playing a lot of the like pop metal kind of stuff, or pop hard rock stuff that was filling up. But if you pulled like musicians aside and said, "Hey, do you know?" They were like, "Oh yeah, that record's great." They were all like these closet Depeche Mode fans, like
Yeah.
wearing shirts, and they didn't look the part, but they were very into what was going on.
Wow.
And it was great. So they were, it's weird though, because I know we were talking before we went on, we were talking about The Cure. I became a Cure fan like right away. And I kind of was all about them from about 84 or so. But for some reason, Depeche was I heard singles and like clubs and stuff, and I'd hear songs here and there, but other than like that mixtape from camp, for some reason, and it didn't grab me the same way until Black Celebration, and then I was all in forever.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we're about the same age, I think. I was around 14 when I got bit by the Depeche Mode bug, back when People Are People dropped. That song made a big splash among me and my friends, and a lot of people in the country, really. Um, I think I picked up the People Are People compilation first, which isn't that great, but then I also got Some Great Reward on vinyl, the latter of which I listened to over and over.
side
And
two, get it?
yeah, and I also did have the Catching Up with Depeche Mode compilation on vinyl, which is fantastic. So I've been a fan since then and pretty much bought or listened to all their subsequent albums as they came out. And I finally saw them live in 2013 at Austin City Limits, and it was amazing.
Yeah,
Really
just they're
cool.
yeah, they're peerless live. I talk about this with a lot of my friends. Not just, I mean, of course, as performers, the songs and everything, and the light show, and just everything that they've been doing, and just they're one of those few bands that it's a really large venue, but you don't feel like you feel like it has to be that. It's a whole spectacle. But I
Yeah.
also tell a lot of people sonically, you can almost not go to a better sounding show. It's
Hmm.
just the sonic care to detail and expressiveness and the power of it is just tremendous. I've always felt that about them. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they're
Cool.
they're that's it. You're all in. So yeah.
All right. So why don't you go ahead and kick us off with your bottom Depeche Mode studio album, number 15.
Yeah, so I'm sure and I don't know, we don't know each other's lists, so this is
Yeah.
kind of exciting. I know that a lot of I want to say before I start that I don't believe, and I honestly say this, I don't think that there's a subpar Depeche Mode record. Really, like, there's periods, and I think that there's some things I just find myself gravitating to more. But like, there's not a Depeche Mode album that if I heard, I'd be like, oh, take that off. I don't like that. I'm a fan of all their stuff. So I do know that some of my order is going to ruffle some feathers, but I had to be true to what I really like. And I know some of your audience that are traditional Depeche Mode people might come for me with pitchforks a little bit. But so be it. I'm all here for it. So my number 15 is Speak and Spell, right? Um, Terrific fun, dancey record. Um, I'm looking at my notes. It's a very different record than the rest of the Depeche Mode catalog, honestly. And the major thing is that Vince Clarke is the main songwriter. And so the music is a lot more light, dancey, pop. It's fun. I think they're great songs on there. It's a great vibe. Um, nothing to me. It to me stands kind of on its own in the catalog, right? I heard it a lot, not realizing it was funny. I didn't realize, and I don't know if this happened to you, Rich. A lot of the songs on that record I'd heard, but never realized it was Depeche Mode. It didn't connect with me until I got the comp, and until some people said, "Oh, it's Depeche Mode." I was like, "Really?" It doesn't remind me of any of the stuff, the other stuff. And that's because Vince Clarke wrote most of this. Who I love. I loved Yazoo. I love Yazoo. I liked early Erasure a lot. He's got some great solo stuff. But and I love like New Life, Just Can't Get Enough is like infectious. You can't deny them as great singles. But I just always felt like it was a bit of a light, breezy record. It's fun, but not something that like I would say, oh my God, I have to listen to this a lot. And I have heard it a lot. I grew up with it. Um, but it doesn't versus the rest of the catalog to me, it's just a really nice collection of some pop songs. Martin Gore, I think, writes two songs on the record, maybe three, but like he's not even fully into where he's going to become as a songwriter. So fun beginning. But definitely there's no way I would have known that they would have gone where they did with that record. So I put that at the bottom just because I kind of feel like I don't reach for it very much. And the songs that I know from it, I hear all the time in like pop radio. So
Okay, very good. Starting with the beginning, that works for me. Um, my number 15 is Spirit, their 14th studio album. Wow, this album comes down hard on humanity. It's a damning indictment. Opener going backwards, gets the complaining going right away. Then we get Where's the Revolution with more complaining when a call to arms would be more welcome. It sounds a bit awkward as well to me. Eternal sounds like a funeral. There are a few rays of light through the gloom. You Move is about sex with an X. Another song that sounds awkward. And So Much Love is a Love Conquers All song. Poor Man makes use of a simple blues guitar lick featuring a killer tone, but the song itself, I gotta say, it's just awful with more complaining. Perhaps I'm being too critical about the political bent this album has. Depeche Mode are expressing frustrations that most of us are feeling, but it doesn't really make for pleasant listening when it comes to an album experience. The final track, Fail, sung by Martin Gore, is the biggest lecture yet and rather depressing. Spirit does sound like Depeche Mode, and there are some good songs here, but much of it is slow and drab, and I simply found it to be their least enjoyable album. I'm going 3 stars for this one. Oh, and did you have a rating for Speak and Spell?
yeah, I think you know what I didn't rate, but I can totally do that. I would say Speak and Spell is like I said, all the records are great. So
Okay.
I would say Speak and Spell, which would be on the bottom end, would still be 3 stars for me, for sure.
Okay. All right, that's fair. So on to number 14.
All right, here I'm waiting for more pitchforks about to come out. So, so my next choice is A Broken Flame. So again, early stuff. I love a bunch of tracks here. Monument is actually one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs ever. So I do want to say that I love Satellite. I love Leave in Silence. Um, Shouldn't Have Done That's great on this record. But to me, it's a transitional album. This is an 82. Um, at this point, you have their main songwriter from their early days, Vince Clarke, is gone. So they kind of have to figure out, hey, what is Depeche Mode? Are we going to actually, from what I've also understood, they even contemplated breaking up, which was insane because they had a really big hit record right off. They got very popular in the UK and all over Europe. Um, but I feel this album's a little transitional. It's interesting, right? It's like they're trying, and I think they were actually pretty smart about it, looking at hindsight. They realized that they couldn't just completely get rid of the pop sensibility from the first record. And if they did that, they might lose a lot of the initial fan base they had. But they kind of knew that they were going to go in a different direction. I mean, Vince Clarke and Martin Gore kind of were not seeing eye to eye in terms of songwriting and the future. And I guess Vince said he wanted to stay friends with them, but just kind of wanted to do something else. Um, and I really like that it's kind of experimental. So they're trying different things. They're literally doing everything from sampling, early sampling in these days to actually, and they're sampling funny things too, like hitting things, kind of weird keyboard sounds that are kind of that haven't been tracked yet in the way that you would commonly track keyboards. Sometimes through amps, sometimes letting like sound effects kind of occur, like landing on a note and letting it reverberate in weird ways, and then sampling it. Which I think is going to be a big deal later on in their career. Um, but I do like that it's kind of this cool blend of like pop and a little bit of experimental music. It's a little less dancey, although there's still elements of the danciness there. And this is when Alan Wilder joins, right? So this is a big deal. But he's not on the record. It's a strange thing. He toured for the record, but is not on it. And so that's going to be interesting for them later on. We'll start to see how important Alan Wilder is. But yeah, so anyway, it's kind of this interesting in between record. So like I said, I like some of the songs. I still think that they're trying to find out exactly who they are. But I definitely love a lot of it. And like I said, I did mention how much like Monument to me is a great song and really to me showed the direction of like the weightiness of Martin Gore's songwriting and where they were going to go as a band. But I just feel like they're kind of in transition. So it's not quite like the Depeche Mode that I'm really going to fall for in the coming years. But solid
Yeah.
record, none the same. I would also give this record a three
Okay.
stars.
All right. Good stuff, Peter. My number 14 is Exciter, their 10th album. It's from 2001. They got Bjork's producer for this one, and there are indeed some glitchy Bjork sounds. I get the impression this guy filled Alan Wilder's shoes since Alan had recently left the band. Apparently, he was left to finish the album on his own. Depeche always bring fresh new sounds to the table, but these aren't my favorite. There are some fridge sounds, bug zapper sounds, but the big problem with Exciter is a lack of great songs. There are a few very good songs, but most of them are merely good to mid. Strange, this album is not the way I remembered it when I heard it long ago. I had forgotten about The Dead of Night, which almost sounds like a collaboration with Marilyn Manson or someone like that. A very amped up intro, and the metallic latter day Terminator sounds are heavy and trippy. But again, the song itself is merely good, not great. A few tracks are borderline rote, and there are some lyrics I don't like, so I'm going 3.25 stars for Exciter, which for me is pretty good.
Terrific. Awesome. So let me go up next. I think we're at 13
Yes.
and I'm doing Construction Time Again. So this is a really classic record. I actually really love the singles on this record. I love Love in Itself and Everything Counts. I think those are some of the great Depeche Mode singles. I wanted to say one thing, and I forgot to say this before we even got going, and I don't know how you feel about this, Rich. I think one of the things that makes Depeche Mode a brilliant career group is that they pick and they have amazing singles. Like even albums that you might like less, you can probably say at least one or two of the singles, you'll be like, that's a great song. And I think that they're very, I know that sometimes musicians say, I have no idea what the single should be. I always loved that Depeche Mode always knew what the single should be. It was undeniable to them, and they made really good choices with that. So this album is a great example of that. I really like it. I love The Landscape is Changing too, which I don't think was a single, but it's great. But Love in Itself, Everything Counts, just terrific singles. I really felt that they were catching a vibe as to who Depeche Mode will be. And I remember this is one of the earlier records that really like stuck with me. And as I said before, I went backwards, so I kind of went backwards in order, and I really liked this record. There's some powerful moments on it. This is where the classic lineup is solidified. So everyone is kind of involved now in tracking and arranging. I feel like also that this record is really where the blend of Dave Gahan's voice and Martin Gore's voice really kind of come into fruition. Like we start to get an idea of, okay, Martin kind of, when he sings lead, he kind of sings this type of song. And, when David Gahan is kind of the major lead singer, this is what he does. And their harmonies are really, I could tell that like they were really fusing them well here. I really like appreciate that. And it was fun, when I knew I was doing the show with you, I hadn't listened to some of these records in a while. And this album stood out to me a lot of the harmonies. I was like, oh, I don't remember that harmony there, or wow, that's really clever. Just really great. I think it's interesting. There's some elements of industrial, like kind of grooves going on. Very, not so much over heavy-handed, but there's like a feel for that a bit, where you're actually having this industrial groove thing going on. It's still blending with this picturesque dark pop, which I love. And again, the sampling experimentation is really taking full fruition here to really great effect. But again, they're not just sampling. They're not sampling old songs or sampling sounds, but the samplers are more modern and they can do really creative things with them. And it's funny because you'd mentioned some of the social political stuff, which I'll talk about later with some of their stuff. But this is the first album where you're starting to really get a sense of that they're not just writing love songs or kind of quirky relationship things. There's a lot of like social and political threads throughout. I mean, certainly in Everything Counts, you hear it. But they're making a lot of heavy social judgments here. I would assume that they're getting older because they were really young when they start out, which is pretty remarkable how brilliant they were from the get. But I think that they're coming into their own as songwriters. And like I said, Martin Gore in particular, who's the main songwriter, is really kind of soaking in a lot of what he's seeing around him in England and internationally. So, and he's kind of hiding it in these like pop gems. So I really appreciate this record a lot. Again, like this is when I feel like they're really starting to fuse and come together as a band. So I would probably give this like a 3.5 stars.
All right, cool. All right, my number 13 is A Broken Frame. Like we said, their second album, it's from 1982. So, like you said, main songwriter Vince Clarke split and left the other three to fend for themselves, which they did. Martin Gore stepped up to write songs. He started with some songs he had written long ago when he was 17. See You sounds like a 50s song remade for the synth age. I think it's brilliant. Love that sequencer they used for the bass line. The second single from the album is The Meaning of Love, which I find a little bit irritating, although I love parts of it, so I tolerate it. But the third single is killer, Leave in Silence, a moodier affair that portends future directions the band will take. As for the rest of the album, it's a mixed bag. There are some rather lame tracks here, especially the instrumental Nothing to Fear and A Photograph of You, which is kind of a mess. Some of these tracks sound overly robotic, cold, and mechanical, but there is some nice harmonizing from Gore and Gone, and they wrap things up nicely with the final track, The Sun and the Rainfall. This is another 3.25 stars. Pretty good.
Awesome. So I'm going to go for number 12. I'm going to go for Playing the Angel. So I'm actually a huge fan of later Depeche Mode stuff, as many of you are starting to figure out. But this album to me, is funny. It was the only record, Rich, when I was listening back to everything that I didn't really remember a lot of, which was surprising because, like I said, I'm a huge fan. And for some reason, I was trying to remember, like, I remembered a couple of the songs. I remembered Suffer Well. I love John the Revelator, which I think is fantastic on this record. Um, and then I kind of remember the first single, which was Precious. But I was like trying hard to remember the album. And it's a double, vinyl release. It's a long CD. And I just couldn't remember it. And so what I would say in this record is that there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just kind of a lot of the music to me just floats. Kind of, it doesn't really. The songwriting is a little less memorable. I know this is the first record that David Gahan actually wrote songs for and contributed to. So I would also probably attribute it to kind of him figuring out his place in Depeche Mode as a writer. Um, so that's kind of interesting. There is a nice blend of like the classic synth sound and like some of the modern digital stuff that was going on production wise. So I like it. There's these like sinister, like kind of under I guess undertones that are going throughout the record, which I appreciate. So sonically, it's pretty great. There are areas that it's aggressive and harsh in a cool way, which I like. But I just felt like the biggest problem here is that the songs were just not as memorable overall. Um, and it's something that I just felt like the songwriting didn't flesh itself out. Again, not a bad record. Probably, again, like a 3.5 in terms of overall like production as a record, but I just felt that the songs, it's a little bit of a shame to me because I feel like if maybe there was a little more fleshing out of some songs or maybe editing down the record a bit. I know a lot of artists were trying to give you your money's worth on CD or give you these long records. I wonder if maybe they had edited this down a little bit and made it a tighter record. It might have, been more appealing to me. But I just find it's like one of the few Depeche Mode records that kind of sits there, and I'm kind of I get lost in like where I am in the record. I'm not really like drawn to play it again. So yeah, so Plain Angel for me is number 12.
All right, that's good stuff, Peter. Um, so my number 12 is Construction Time Again, their third studio album. It's from 1983. And yeah, Alan Wilder becomes an official member of Depeche Mode at this point. And I do think this is another early album with some great songs mixed with some lame ones. 2 Minute Warning in particular sounds lame, but Love in Itself is a great single, as is Everything Counts. The album, as you were saying, it's a protest against income inequality, and the landscape is changing, is an excellent protest against what we are doing to the environment. Also, Told You So is a tasty dig at Christianity. I never cared much for the song until I checked out the lyrics. Depeche continued to improve with this album, expanding their sound with industrial samples. I've got Construction Time Again at 3.5 stars.
Awesome. Um, I know that this might ruffle a lot of feathers right away because this is kind of low in the catalog, but I had to be honest about it. So my next record is Songs of Love and Devotion. And I know that a lot of people who are like classic Depeche Mode fans, like, are you kidding me? That was a hit record. Why is it so low on the list? So the first thing I want to say to you is that this record is a great example. Like the opening is super strong, right? Um, Really cool. I mean, I Feel You is a great single. I love that they kind of went the Depeche Mode when they went like rock, big rock. It's like, of course, it's sinister big rock because it's Depeche Mode. And I love that I know Gahan went for the total like sex god over the top Jim Morrison kind of like vibe in the video, and even in the vocal take, you feel it. I love that's kind of this great overdone like bluesy kind of feel and groove. I thought it was really surprising and cool that they were going in a bit of a different direction, which is what I always love about them. And then one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs is on this, "Walking in My Shoes." I love that song. I thought it was a great single, and I love the closer, "Higher Love." Great song as well. Really, really terrific like sensibility of let me take kind of what's happening a little bit in terms of the hard rock alt world with the popularity of groups like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and and a lot of what's going on in Nirvana certainly. But we're British and we've been around and we're huge and we're gonna kind of I see what you're doing, but we're gonna take it in our blender and do something really cool with it, which I like. So the grooves and the sensibility is kind of they're very current in terms of time and feel, but there's the Depeche Mode take on it, and lyrically always there. I think that they were doing some really great stuff. A lot of clever lyrics going throughout this record, and I think that like it kind of fits in with the cultural landscape musically of what was happening again with the Depeche Mode, through the Depeche Mode visor. I just feel again that it felt like the band was a little strained at that point. You could tell. I know there was a lot going on with the band. I mean, Gahan, um, was really in heavy into addiction at that point. And I know they were all dealing with drinking issues and so forth. I know David was dealing with with cocaine and heroin and how that can kind of influence stuff. But my big problem, and I hate to sound so crass, but if we're dealing just strictly with the music, I feel like the album kind of drops off after the strong opening. Like it really, the first three songs or so, I'm like, oh, I'm all in. This is great. And then it kind of just drifts. And it kind of like even tempo wise, it doesn't things that for stronger Depeche Mode albums, tempos are a big thing, and they're kind of moving tempos a lot, which I'll talk about later in as we go down the list. And this album, it kind of felt like they weren't really paying as much attention, and it felt a little bit like not as happening as it normally did. And even with the great mixer Flood, who did a lot of their classic stuff, who's just an incredible musician artist, I feel like as a whole record, if you really go back and listen, it's like everyone remembers it because the opening is so strong, but it kind of drops off from there. And you know. I just felt like I wanted more, especially coming off of such a great set of records. So that's why this record is a little bit lower. Again, nothing wrong with it. The band is a little strained. It shows a bit in the material. I felt like there's like maybe four or five great songs, and then the rest of it is kind of doesn't really move where it should be. So that's why it's a little bit lower. Again, though, for even in Depeche Mode, I'll keep that at 3.5.
3.5. Okay, that's fair. Okay, so my number 11, and this one hurts. I don't know. I think this is probably going to be my most controversial take. I've got Ultra, their ninth studio album. It's from 1997. Ultra is their addiction album, both in real life and the subject matter of the album itself. Dave Gahan went off the deep end on heroin and cocaine during this time, and lucky for him, got a court order to attend rehab, which saved his life. Martin Gore had his own addiction to alcohol, which he deals with on the excellent track Home, which he also sings. The best songs on this album are tippy top tier Depeche Mode songs. Unfortunately, there is some filler, in my opinion, something I rarely say about Depeche Mode songs. In fact, there is nothing remarkable about the second side of this album. Not even drummer Yaki Liebetzeit of Can fame can enliven the limp track The Bottom Line. There are three instrumentals here. Other topics include deluding oneself, and the song Free State deals with recovery. The opener Barrel of a Gun is a powerhouse juggernaut. Gone sounds like he's in the throes of his addiction as twisted, mocking synths swirl around him, while other high-pitched synths sound alarming and sinister. Unfortunately, the following track, The Love Thieves, is underwhelming. I think they should have segged immediately into It's No Good, which is a candidate for their best song ever. Home and Useless are the other great songs. So really, you get four great tunes, super great, and it feels like they wrapped up too soon, as the rest of the tracks I find to be just inconsequential. So I'm at 3.75 stars for Ultra. Really good.
All right. So, what was funny is that when I was doing this list, my top five I could nail right away, and kind of my bottom five I kind of also could nail right away. The middle part, this part was really hard for me, Rich.
Hmm.
So I was kind of like I had it down and I kept changing and I re-listened to a lot of this stuff because I want to be really fair to the catalog. So I just wanted to say that I'm entering the zone where it was really interesting, and I was kind of in some places splitting hairs, so but this is what we do. So my number 10 is Delta Machine, right? Um, there's some great songs in this record. It's an angry record. Bit of a, I always get a sense that it's, and of course, a lot of people say, well, Depeche Mode, they are dark. I'm like, yeah, but this is like dark and a little angry. It's a bit of a bitter record in terms of some of the lyrical content. Um, I know that, and it's funny, I remember that feeling and I got it back right away and listening. It's not surprising Flood actually mixed this record again, which was cool after kind of being away from Depeche for a while. So sonically, it's terrific. I really like Heaven has a great mix of like these electric guitars and a kind of an acoustic piano, which is kind of strange in a Depeche Mode kind of frame, but it's really cool. And because we're so accustomed to electronicness of it, it's almost jarring when you hear it. I love a lot of the songs. There's a song, Secret to the End, which I didn't even realize at the time, but I guess was about Gahan facing his cancer diagnosis and thankfully beating it. It hit me a lot harder because when I was listening to these, I was like, what was going on with them when I was listening to the lyrics, like this is heavy stuff. It's great. And I knew it was kind of past his addiction phase, and I didn't realize he was dealing with cancer. So it made the lyrics even more explosive to me. I love Welcome to My World and My Little Universe. There's some great songs on this. I do think it's a little bit of a dense record. And again, like I said, and for good reason, there's a lot of bitterness going on. There's growth stuff going on. So I feel like this record kind of still sits a little angry. And sometimes as a result, the material is less, like I want to embrace it a lot less. But again, it's Depeche Mode, so still their songs rise above the din, but it's not a record that's easy to warm up to, even though like I'm attracted to a lot of it. A lot of the other songs are harder for me to warm up to, but I appreciate it as a piece of art. So I would probably give this record maybe a 3.7.
Okay, cool. All right, my number 10 is their 12th album, Sounds of the Universe from 2009. It feels wrong to put this above Ultra, but Ultra has shortcomings I cannot ignore. Sounds of the Universe doesn't really bring much new to the table. In fact, there's a pervasive old school retro thing going on throughout. Opener in Chains has a Casio beat and toy xylophone. When I first heard the single Wrong, I really disliked it. I didn't completely get it, but since then I have come to love its relentlessly negative outlook, which is taken to the point of parody. Depeche Mode often employ a subtle sense of humor that is often only apparent to themselves, and Gone delivers a killer vocal on Wrong. Unfortunately, I really dislike the vocals on Little Soul, but that's the only dud in the bunch. Fragile Tension is excellent, and Come Back is gold, featuring a very grungy guitar never heard before. Spacewalker is an excellent instrumental, and Perfect has shimmering synths. Miles Away sounds like they used gas slowly escaping a balloon as a musical template. Really wild. That's just at the beginning of the song, though. Depeche Mode often have musical elements that appear in just one or two places on a track, and that really adds depth and color to their songs in interesting ways. So I'm at 4 stars for this one. It's very good.
So my number nine, Rich, is Exciter. So I find Exciter to be kind of playful and exploratory, which I really like. I like, especially at that point in their career, right? This is like 2001-ish or so. And so like I really thought that there were some great singles on this record. I love Dream On. When I first heard that single was out quite a few weeks or months before the album, and I loved it, knocked me out right away. I thought it was cool because it felt like they were searching again for new sounds, and I always appreciate artists that I really like. It could have been very easy for Depeche Mode to go on autopilot, right, like, anywhere from, I don't know, from like Violator on, because they had such a great, rich template. And like all great artists, they were like, okay, we did that, and they threw it away. And so I love that this record, that Exciter is them kind of trying to find some other stuff. What else can we do? So it's an exploratory record, and I also felt like a lot of it's soundscapey. I could hear a lot of the music on this record, maybe in films or kind of there's like a kind of scenic kind of vibe throughout, and maybe some of it is attached to. I remember listening to this record a lot when I was like traveling on trains or on planes and so forth, and it felt a certain way to me when I listened to this album. So it really worked well. The singles are, as I mentioned Dream On. When the Body Speaks is amazing. It's like really a gorgeous, beautiful song. I love Shine on this record. I love Goodnight Lovers. I think that Gahan is stretching out as a singer here, which I really think is great because it's very easy once you become, this frontman of this like worldwide mammoth group and you have such a unique voice that he could just kind of do that voice throughout. And I really liked on Exciter that he was actively, you could tell he was like, I want to do some different things with my voice. I want to approach things differently. And I really like that about the record. There's also, like I said, a great use of like, I think I mentioned this before, but on this album, there's a great use of acoustic instruments, and they're kind of mixing with the electronic treatments that Depeche Mode normally does. So this is a really fun experimental record. I struggled with this because it kept floating up and down for me. So this at this time this week, Exciter is nine, but it could have been a couple places higher. It's really, like I said, it's a really terrific record. I'd probably put this at a 3.8.
3.8. Okay. All right. Well, my nine is the most recent one, their 15th album. It came out in 2023. Memento Mori. Death and an afterlife are prominent themes on Memento Mori, as could be expected, especially considering the recent loss of founding member Andy Fletcher. But other subjects are addressed as well, such as love and addiction, topics that almost always turn up on Depeche Mode albums. Martin Gore in Soul With Me claims he is ready for death, but has also said in an interview he was being tongue in cheek. However, the single Ghosts Again sounds confident there will be an afterlife. It's a very good song with a cool keyboard solo, a worthy minor hit, but not quite what I would call excellent. There are two songs that I consider excellent here, though. Before We Drowned and Never Let Me Go, which appears on the second half of the album, the stronger side, despite having the weakest track, Caroline's Monkey. Amazingly, Gone and Gore are still an excellent voice. The music sounds good, although there's not much in the way of innovative sounds. It sounds like classic DM. So I'm going 4 stars for Memento Mori.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk about that record soon. My number eight is Spirit. So, Rich, I totally agree with you. I think this is, I know you have much further down your list, and I totally get it. I don't disagree with actually your assessment of it either. It is a downer record, in terms of it feels like they're older and they're really angry about a lot of where the world is going. Um, I do have to say though, I really loved a lot of there are these creepy, sinister sounds going throughout, right? It's like this wicked underbelly of what's happening, and I kind of love that they really are capturing kind of their anger and dissatisfaction, and it creeps into the production in a really cool way. This album is kind of a return to really ultra electronic sounds too. There's not as much acoustic stuff going on. Um, and there's a lot of like I loved, you also mentioned the song You Move, is incredible. It's sexy and dark, but really like angry and weird. I love Where's the Revolution? I love Going Backwards, I think was great. That's, I think, the opener. Um, it's and Fail is extremely, it's a heavy way to end the record, but because they're unlike earlier stuff, they're outwardly addressing the political turmoil and like what's going on around climate change, and fascism. I mean, even the imagery that we're seeing on the album cover, and Anton Corbijan's artwork and so forth, and the photos and the videos are very much like addressing straight up fascism. Being a group from England, and obviously what was happening, not just what's been happening in the United States, but what's happening also globally, can actually you could see why they would really want to address these issues and why it was involved. I know that they have like a new producer working with them. I think James Ford was producing this record too. So I felt like this was a kind of an interesting thing that they were bouncing off working with him. And so you have these kind of interesting places they're going. It is a dark record. It's a dense album. I found myself very attracted to because I think that they did a lot of things. They were a little brave to me on this record because a group of their stature could just kind of, again, not really pay much attention to what's going on. They certainly financially don't really have to worry about those things, but they're artists, and I really felt that they were showing their frustration, and I think they did it very effectively. This is Fletcher's last record too. So there's part of me that thinks it's really awesome and brave that this is where he ended up. This was his final major statement, because he, as we know, had a lot to do with not just songwriting but production too. So again, hats off to him and what he would and what he was made up of. I would give this record a really strong 3.8.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I should give it another chance. I mean, I do appreciate that they are really have some important things to say on that one. So maybe I just need to adjust my attitude and try again.
It is a little, but I think you bring up a point. Like, if you're a Depeche Mode fan, you're like listening, and you're kind of going into the record, and then you're kind of hit with all this. You're like, whoa, it's a little. It can come off like you said. I think you used the word preachy. It definitely can. And I think that they're aware of that. I mean, the flags on the cover and everything, they're letting you know, like, hey, this is where we're at right now. But
Yeah.
I think if it's not a casual listen. Let's put it that way. But so I think your criticism's fair enough, but it might be the mindset of how you're listening to and when you're listening to it.
Oh, yeah, that can definitely play a big part in how we hear music. All right, my number 8 is their first album, Speak and Spell, which came out in 1981. This is a wonderful debut. Fantastic percolating synth sounds abound. There is a primitive Casio element here as well, sort of a rinky-dink, tinkly bonk sound. I got that from some music critic. Opening cut New Life has that sound, and I'm crazy about it. A few of these songs are explicitly gay themed, The addictive Boys Say Go has a sexy club vibe, and this stuff was super hot in the gay clubs. Dave Gaughan sounds great on vocals, as does Martin Gore on the track Any Second Now Voices, which sounds exquisite and should have been the closer. But then we get Just Can't Get Enough, which is another totally addictive song. It was the last single written by Vince Clarke, who split after this album. Again, there's some great songs, but there's also some mid, and Big Muff is a meh instrumental. So I'm going 4 stars for Speak and Spell.
Well, hopefully this will redeem myself to early Depeche Mode fans, early music Depeche Mode fans. So my number seven is Some Great Reward. As I said to you, Rich, I think that I think before we went on, we were talking about this in the width and breadth of Depeche Mode's albums and their discography. I kind of see them in having like almost three waves. And the first, Some Great Reward to me is the end of the first or the culmination of the first wave of Depeche Mode music. And it's brilliant. It's like they now to me on this record, they caught that balance of creating like gritty, dark pop music. It's stripped down in some places. The arrangements are actually really funky in some places too, which is great. So they're not just doing kind of these like lighter dance records that we saw. Now they're kind of like, hey, we dance, but we dance this way. We celebrate, we move this way. And I think this album to me captures or encapsulates early Depeche Mode sounds at their very best. I mean, Something to Do, Lie to Me, what a great song, great lyric. I love Gahan's vocal on that. And of course, the two like masterpieces, like I was talking to you about side two, like Blasphemous Rumors, Master and Slave. Just really, you're like, wow, like, I see what's going on here. They're playing and being kind of playful and creative, but saying some really cool stuff. Um, and I really feel like Gahan's voice is really like now he's very clear on like this is what I sound like. He moves more into a lot of the deeper parts of his voice unapologetically here. He's not as tentative anywhere at all. And again, like I also really like that there is this dark, creepy thing going on throughout this record because it is a pop record, but it's a creepy pop record that kind of like snuck into the upper echelons of like the Billboard charts, which is funny. And it became, obviously their big commercial breakthrough in the US, right? I think it's their first platinum record or something like that in the United States. And again, it is definitely, I feel like it's a really great statement and closing this first wave of their career. And because I think they're about to go on to real greatness. So I think I would call Some Great Reward might be like my first, I would probably call this maybe a 3.9, almost a 4.
Mhm.
But it's a really terrific record. And like I said, I really, when I want to hear early Depeche Mode, I go to Some Great Reward.
Nice. All right. My number seven is their sixth studio album, Music for the Masses. It's from 1987. Back when this came out, I was 17 and I didn't like the title. I didn't want music for the masses. I wanted cool underground music. I only found out recently that the title was a joke. It turns out jokes were the motivation for much of what they did. I passed on the LP at the time, but I heard it plenty from friends. Of course, I ended up getting it on CD eventually. I never warmed up to it though. I always just wanted to hear Never Let Me Down Again and Strange Love, which were the clear standouts for me. They released other songs at their peak with subsequent albums, but these two songs represent Depeche at their very best. When I used to put this album on, the song that trips me up was Sacred, and I realize now I really dislike that one. And it's dangerously catchy to boot. From there, we get Little 15 and Behind the Wheel, which are both excellent, if not tippy top shelf. I Want You Now makes use of a lot of sensuous breathing and sexy vocalizations. The whole album is steeped in sex, really. It ends with a nice piano-led instrumental. So there are excellent songs here, but also some merely good ones and one mediocre. So I'm going 4 stars, my last 4-star rating.
All right. So I my number six is was a lot lower on your list, but this is Sounds of the Universe. Um, and again, I concur with something you said. You said it was kind of like a, I think you mentioned, Rich, that it was kind of a harkening back almost to a lot of classic Depeche Mode sounds. I totally agree, but I feel that this album came out in 2009, just for context, right? So I still feel like it was a great bridge of kind of looking back a little bit, but it felt inspired and edgy at the same time. I think the songwriting is really excellent on this record, and the production is exceptional. When I heard this record, I put it on right away again. Like I felt like I felt as a fan and as just a fan of music in general, but as a Depeche Mode fan, I was really excited about this record because I kind of went in, figuring, okay, I'm sure it's going to be great. It's Depeche Mode, but I felt that they were really inspired. I could feel it in the grooves. It like stood out to me. Um, I will say to you, Wrong to me is to me one of the best Depeche Mode songs ever written. I loved it. I did see the video when I first heard it, so I think that that helped a lot because the video is brilliant. And I just right away I was like, okay, they're going totally like we're gonna laugh about all of this crap. And like I just loved everything about it. I love the visuals, I love the song. I love Gahan's voice on that. I love that they're multi-tracking him to no end on the choruses, like in your face. Um, and I thought, considering also what I think was really funny, I read somewhere that Martin Gore and Gahan were talking about the state of pop music and how crappy a lot of the choruses were, and like kind of joking. So that was apparently the seeds for Wrong, which makes it even funnier to me because they basically were like, well, we're just going to talk about everything that can possibly go wrong in a day. And they were making fun of like a lot of what was on pop radio, and that's why the video is really terrific. So for those of you that are watching, definitely check it out because it's classic. But Wrong was exceptional, but I love In Chains. I love Fragile Tension, as you mentioned. What a great song, right? Peace is great. I find this album is a bit adventurous, and I think it's pretty brilliant. I love that it's Depeche Mode, but they're kind of doing some stuff. There's a lot of drama on the record. I like that too. I thought the tempos, they were paying attention to tempo again too. Let's be playful. Let's not just sit in this one tempo. So I really like that. And there's a nice mixture of the analog again and modern keyboard sounds. Um, and I also want to mention that the vocal production on this record is really great. I could tell that they spent a lot of time doing stuff. If you've never listened to this record on headphones, this is a great album. I mean, many Depeche Mode albums are great to listen to on headphones, but this album, as a newish or third phase Depeche Mode record, is really exceptional to listen to on headphones. I just appreciated it, all around. So that's why this record, it was really difficult for me to keep this out of my top five because this record really got me ultra excited about Depeche Mode again. So I would give this record a 4.0.
All right. Amazing. Good stuff. Okay, my number six. This is where I've got Delta Machine. Their 13th studio album came out in 2013. This placement will seem too high for some, but Delta Machine is killer. It's got a killer dark vibe. At least part of it's killer. It's great, but not consistently great. But the opening 4 songs are gold. Welcome to My World is a powerful opener. Second track, Angel, is deliciously seedy. Great lyrics on this album that mix themes of drug use, lust, recovery, and salvation. Heaven is otherworldly and one of their best singles, which is saying a lot. And I have come to love Secret to the End, a very moody piece with some muscular synths. A few of these songs seem to be built around a simple blues guitar riff, which I think has something to do with the album title, a play on Delta blues. The final track, Goodbye, does this. The riff plays throughout, and Depeche drop in all kinds of amazing synth parts. There's a weird finality to this album, and Goodbye is an incredible closer. It does unfortunately have some mid songs which drag it down, so I'm at 4.25 stars for Delta Machine. Very, very good.
I agree with you, Rich. That's a great record. I think that a great point to Delta Machine, I felt if they had shaved off a couple of the songs, it's a long record too. On vinyl, it's like a double vinyl pressing, very long. I always felt that if they had shaved off maybe a couple, it might have been a bit higher. But I agree with you. Delta Machine's a great record, and for your audience that maybe doesn't know it as well, it's definitely a really terrific record. It's one of those albums that's great and then somehow got lost a little bit in their discography because it's so rich, but it is a great record. I agree. All right. We're going to top five land now, right? These are the best of the best. This was very hard for me to do, to like leave a bunch of these albums that I just passed off the top five. But I'm going to start with number five is Memento Mori. Um, I'm blown away by this record. It's a brilliant album. It's sumptuously produced. It's just a gorgeous record that you could tell they took great time and detail to make. Um, you losing Andy Fletcher was very heavy for the band emotionally. And they weren't actually sure. A lot of people didn't believe it, but Martin Gore was very clear that he wasn't necessarily sure that the Depeche Mode was going to happen ever again, and was very serious about that. And I think that with Fletch being gone, I know Gahan and Gore had to really talk about a lot of heavy things. And from my understanding, they got very close as a result. But it's foreboding. It's a gorgeous, dark record. It's contemplative, dealing a lot, as we know, the themes of mortality, which is actually obviously throughout. What's interesting is that, from my understanding, is that Gore was already writing kind of on that tip. My understanding is that he'd already been kind of writing about that, losing a lot of close friends and family members. Um, and so just losing Fletch in the middle of all that, I think really brought to another level. I think there's a line on My Cosmos is Mine, which is the opening, where it says, "Don't play with my world." I remember it opens with that line, and I thought, wow, like I was disarmed from the get. So I love this record. Spoke to me very greatly. As you mentioned, Ghosts Again is honestly one of the best singles I think they've released in years. And that's, again, as we've talked about, saying a lot. I think it's a gorgeous tribute without being sappy, which is kind of hard to do. It's like classic Depeche Mode, but again, because they're Depeche Mode, there's some differences. I love the extended section in the middle, which I guess you can call a bridge, but it's Depeche Mode, so it could be a bunch of another part. It's a beautiful song, and really terrific. I just love this record. I think it's great. People Are Good is a song that really also hits me very hard. But honestly, I was writing down my favorites, and I started realizing I'm writing like almost every song on this record. I really love it. I think it works really well as a full statement too. My favorite Depeche Mode albums are the ones where you see this kind of theme or something that runs throughout. And I feel like this record was a great return to that, where we're not just making four or five great singles and then we're kind of throwing in some different songs or experimenting. I think they very much had a mission. They were very clear on the writing, and they were clear on how the songs were going to work with each other. So I even feel like the running order, the sequence was very deliberate and well thought out. So anyway, what an amazing statement to make this deep into your career, 40 years into making records, you make a record as great as Memento Mori. Very few artists do that. I put this high on purpose, and I was wondering if I was padding it a bit just because of my emotions of Fletch passing, but I really felt like this was one of the Depeche Mode albums I listened to quite a lot. So yeah, so I would say Memento Mori would probably be like a 4.2.
All right. Yeah. It is a fantastic tribute to Fletch and really an amazing late period showing. Very impressive. Okay, my number five is Songs of Faith and Devotion, their eighth studio album. It came out in 1993, which is actually my favorite year in life. A very difficult album for the band to make, yet the best songs maintain the high level set forth by previous album Violator. Dave Gahan was deep into his addiction, so was Martin Gore. Things got so bad between Alan Wilder and Gore that Alan determined he would quit the band in due time. This album has both a harder edge and gospel elements. Opener I Feel You is big and bombastic, while next track Walking in My Shoes is more subdued in comparison. Gone really lays his guts out on the spiritual condemnation. I think that's probably one of his best vocal performances, if not best songs. Judas is just okay, but In Your Room is top shelf Depeche with those haunting lyrics. I'm hanging on your words, living on your breath, feeling with your skin. Will I always be here? Ugh. Then you got One Caress recorded with a symphony. That's also excellent. And the album closes strong with the spiritual Higher Love. Spirituality and redemptions are big themes on this album, but in classic Depeche fashion, there is a dark side as well. While there are some excellent songs here, I can't quite get the album as a whole to excellent. So I'm at 4.25 stars. Very, very good, almost excellent.
Wow, yeah. Great. That's a good record. There's a lot there I laugh about because it's just it's so crazy to think about what was going on with them personally, but they were always kind of able to still put together great, like really worthwhile records, even when they were dealing with all sorts of craziness. It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy that their careers in marred. I mean, even some of the best bands that we love, if you're around long enough and you're dealing with addiction or challenges or whatever, sometimes it impacts the art. Depeche Mode is one of those, is probably the only group or one of the only groups where that never really happened. Um, you know, so we're about to enter for my number four, we're entering what I call the holy trinity of Depeche Modeness. And I think that there is a period where Depeche Mode has released three of the best records ever made in a row. And this is the first one of those. So my number four is Black Celebration. So, why do I call this the beginning of the Holy Trinity? So, I feel like there's a part where Depeche is really kind of walking their own path and are really just chasing this amazing muse and are really kind of focused on the singular vision of doing great things musically and just and growing as songwriters almost faster than they can write. My understanding is that Black Celebration, they started writing a lot of material. And my understanding is that between Black Celebration and Violator, there's apparently at least 2 to 3 albums worth of outtakes of songs that are fully finished and produced, but they didn't put them out. So they were really, Martin Gore was really exploding at this point. Fletch is really in the band, so he's very much involved with production and kind of pushing back on some of the production decisions that were made prior and kind of saying, no, we're going to go this way. And it's just fantastic. It's a massive jump musically from Some Great Reward, right? To think that those records were made in less than 2 years apart is pretty phenomenal. It's very different. Um, it's gloriously dark, sexy electronic pop. They kind of create their own sound like, hey, we are Depeche Mode, but we're paying attention to everything that's going on around us, but we're actually really into this. And it's like we as listeners kind of follow them because we're like, if you think about the other records coming out at the time, and then you hear, Black Celebration, you're like, whoa. You know what I mean? Especially in the mid 80s, 1986, where everyone's celebrating opulence and all this stuff. And our album's called Black Celebration. You know, I mean, it's really intense and just really says a lot about what they're about. It's a haunting record. This record to me stuck with me, and like no other. And the songs are just great. Black Celebration, New Dress, Stripped, which was huge, banned apparently on American radio. They were supposed to release it as a single here, and it never came out. Which you probably might be surprised at, Rich. I was pretty sure I checked my single of Stripped, and it's a UK only single. Never came out in the States, although everyone here, we were all listening to Stripped and we knew what was going down. But American radio was like, we're not playing that. So they had to change the single. But a Question of Lust, but Not Tonight. Just an incredible, incredible record. Um, this was, as I mentioned before, the first Depeche Mode album that fully consumed me, where I was like, I am not only a fan of them, I'm a fan of like their records and the writing. And I really started to pay a lot of attention to the credits. And it was a very momentous record for me in just listening. But I love this album. And it's also worthy to note that a lot of great records came out, I think, as a result of Black Celebration. And I say this across the the pond of any type of music, because I felt like this was really. I think people underestimate the importance of Black Celebration because they were like this big. They finally had a platinum record in America. They were this groundswell around them, and they kind of decide to go. We're really going to go about what we are. And they made a brave step because a lot of people would have been like, hey, why are you going to this subject matter? Or why are you going really dark? And they really did a fantastic job of finding that balance of we're going to still be kind of working within the realms of pop, but we're going to write dark, ambitious music. And our lyrics are not going to be, we're not going to pretend like we're happy with everything that goes on. And I just think it really says a lot about their character and is probably why we're still talking about Depeche Mode in 2025. So yeah, great.
Yeah. All
Oh,
right.
I'm supposed to number this. So I would give this a 4.4.
4.4. Okay. Yeah, I'll be talking about that shortly. But my number four is Playing the Angel. Some might consider that a high placement. Their 11th album, it's from 2005. This is a very doom and gloom album, a bit of a downer, so naturally I love it. There is a fresh array of killer metallic sounds, everything programmed to perfection in classic Depeche Mode fashion. A pain that I'm used to with its killer chorus, the doomy John the Revelator, and Precious are all five-star songs, the latter dealing with Martin Gore's divorce and its effect on his children. There's only one mid-song, the track called Macro, which seems to be about tripping and finding God. Other than that, the album is very strong. Even the lone instrumental Introspector is excellent, recalling those Berlin era Bowie instrumentals. Nothing's Impossible, written by Dave Gahan, who has writing credits on a Depeche Mode album for the first time here. That's an amazing song. The words are really positive, yet they're sung in a very downer style, creating a strange, doomy contrast. This album is excellent. I'm at 4.5 stars.
Rich, it's funny. I I don't think I totally. I'm really glad that you mentioned. I never really considered the connection between some of the songs or sonically that record and Bowie's Berlin period, which I love. Like Low is just incredible. Of course, I'm a huge Heroes fan. And as I got older, I love you end up loving side two probably more than side one even, just for its like total daring music stuff and Lodger, of course. But yeah, I can totally see that, like in the kind of again, through the Depeche Mode visor, where they were kind of on that, like that soundscapey kind of thing going on. It's a great point. Okay. Top three. So this was hard, but number three, and by the way, I will mention that number three and number two, I was flip-flopping up till late last night a little bit, but number three is Music for the Masses for me. Again, this is the album two of the trilogy to me of like some of the best made records ever. Um, Music for the Masses, again, you mentioned Rich, the sarcastic title, because it was anything but. It's bold, it's huge, it's cinematic. It's to me, music for the masses in a lot of ways is kind of a declarative and defining statement for Depeche Mode. They kind of really knew after Black Celebration was kind of it was the hit, but kind of a dark hit, right? It quietly goes gold in America, which was shocking for a lot of people because I know their label was very worried about it. But even without getting as much radio play rather, as the previous album, Some Great Reward, which was obviously a lot lighter in pop, they showed that, hey, we're going a certain way and our fans follow. And Black Celebration was huge in Europe, right? So they kind of said, well, now that we've kind of done our ultra dark record of the 80s, we're going to kind of mend the fences a bit and find this middle ground where they were doing really sharp, interesting pop. It's kind of like they're like becoming the biggest alternative band, quote unquote, whatever that means at this point, right? Where they kind of don't need radio. It's radio will either follow them or not, but they're going to kind of make these bold records. And so what I really love here, and Alan Wilder becomes really like a major part of their production team too, right? He's really kind of stepping up. And just sonically, this record is just, it's fantastic. It really has like the drum sounds are great. The programming is huge. It's like you kind of heard it before, but you kind of haven't. It's very particular. And the singles are, as you mentioned, Never Let Me Down Again and Strange Love are the top Depeche Mode things. When you think about what does Depeche Mode sound like, those singles are like at the forefront. Never Let Me Down Again. I think when I got this album, I listened to it straight through, and I probably listened to the song Never Let Me Down Again, maybe straight for about 2 hours because it just what an incredible song. But
Yeah.
the whole album is great. I mean, creepiest Depeche Mode song arguably is Little 15. That used to actually totally freak me out, but great song, ultra creepy, Gahan at his best in terms of that creepy, dark, like lower octave kind of sounding thing. But even the single Behind the Wheel, I love. No Thing is great. It's a really important record for them. And I even loved just the visuals. Anton Corbijn is really taking up with the band and presenting like them in a very unique way. And I think that that's when this album is really when Depeche Mode to me kind of started leaving the pack of everybody. They were kind of in their in terms of their contemporaries. I felt like they and The Cure kind of left everybody out, and everyone else was kind of trying to follow them in their dust. But yes, this is a terrific record. Again, the second of their great trilogy to me of records, the third of which will come soon.
Okay, and what do you rate it?
Oh, sorry. I would rate this record as a 4.7.
4.7. Okay, that's up there. All right, my number three is Black Celebration. Their fifth studio album came out in '86. Depeche Mode turned over a darker leaf with Black Celebration, going in the direction predicted by the last track on their previous album, Blasphemous Rumors. They are close to the peak of their powers on Black Celebration. The opening track is towering, so good. Depeche have become masters of creating an atmosphere and painting a picture with their synth sounds. Next track, Fly on the Windscreen, is brilliant, although I prefer the more minimal version found on Catching Up with Depeche Mode. It Doesn't Matter too experiments with human voices as synthetic musical instruments. The track Sometimes is just okay, and that's a big reason why Black Celebration lands where it does. These are really excellent albums, so I have to split hairs. But everything else here is gold. My old vinyl LP had But Not Tonight as the last track, and I became bitterly disillusioned when I found out that it was just a bonus track, not an official part of the core album. Still, this is one of their best, a glorious celebration of life in the face of darkness. 5 stars for Black Celebration.
Yeah, just an incredible record. It was great, and I thought initially when I had it, when I was putting the list together, I was like, do I have to really listen to Black Celebration? And I was like, well, of course, I'm listening to everything. And I
Yeah,
put it on. I was like, oh God, this record's so good.
yeah.
So I was laughing because I'm laughing at what you were saying because I was thinking to myself, my top 3 or 4 records, I could probably move them at different times of the year, depending on where I'm at. So my number two is going to probably cause a lot of consternation, but I was and I was struggling between music for the masses and this being number 2 or 3, but my number two is Ultra. So this record is, as you said, very dark. I mean, and dark as in like, hey, we're really not really sure if we're going to live much longer. Dark. They are the band is really going through it. Gahan is full out heroin addict. By the time they're actually going to record, he's actually not there when they start out. And I think that everyone's feeling really tremendously sorrowful. Lots of things are falling apart, although they're this huge band. And I think that Martin Gore talked at a period that it was strange. Like on the outside, everyone's looking like you're in the largest band in the world practically. Why are you so sad and why are you so angry? And that was frustrating for him too. He's like, I don't know why. Why is all this falling apart? And so it's great that they kind of turned in this darkness, they turned kind of the mirror onto themselves and said, well, let's write about this. Let's talk about it. And you see that. And I think all the singles on this record are like top shelf Depeche Mode songs. You mentioned It's No Good. Great song. Great video too. Useless. It's amazing. Barrel of a Gun knocked me out the first time I heard it. Really dark and heavy. That's the other thing too. There's this really, so you have this like trip hop thing, right? That's kind of going on throughout. So this was the period of the 90s where you have like Tricky and Massive Attack and Bjork, Goldie doing a little more dance trap kind of jungle music as well. But all of these artists bombed the bass. All of this stuff was really huge in England and in New York City, where I was living, it was everywhere, and some of my favorite records coming out. So when I heard Barrel of a Gun, it knocked me out because I felt like they grabbed kind of the heaviness and power of like grunge and like hard rock stuff that was going on, but then were really influenced by the UK kind of garage dub trip hop thing. And they kind of said, all right, but let's make it Depeche Mode. And I love that they kind of did that. I see Ultra as being not just a really great record, but also a really important album because I feel like if Ultra didn't happen the way it did, I don't know if we would be talking about Depeche Mode in the same way. I felt like this record was their bridge record to saying like, hey, we know what we were, but now we're kind of going and we're going to go somewhere else. And really kind of get rid of all of what you thought Depeche Mode was, and we're going to put out this record. So I really feel like it's mold breaking and groovy. I really feel like it's an important way of kind of moving Depeche Mode listeners from the old and mid period to the new. So I really, I just think as artists, I really have a lot of respect for them in doing this record. I thought it was very adventurous. I think Gahan's a nut because he literally, from my understanding, walked out of rehab. in the midst of this record and went in literally 2 days later and recorded the vocal for Barrel of a Gun. And people were like, that was going to be, hey, can we do this with him? And he sounded great. And so they were like, all right, we have a group. So that says a lot about how talented he is. I want to, before I leave this record, I wanted to talk about Home, which is arguably, emotionally, is one of the most gorgeous, touching songs ever. I remember loving the song when I had the album and being obsessed with it. And then I remember I had done a recording session out in Berlin, and I was hanging out with some people late night, and we ended up at someone's apartment at 3 in the morning. And I remember vividly he had this huge TV, which was shocking to me at the time. It was like gigantic. And he put it on, and they were showing popular videos at the time. It was whatever, MTV2 Europe or something. And the video for Home came on. And I remember I said to everyone, you all have to leave. And I pushed everyone out of the room. And I remember turning it up and like watching the video in the dark and just being totally consumed. I thought it was an amazing, if people haven't seen that video or if you haven't seen it in a while, it was one of the few videos I thought perfectly captured the song and the emotion behind it. I got very emotional about it. So I think about Home a lot. I love that song. I can never listen to it just once passing. That to me is top shelf stuff. And arguably Martin Gore's very best lead vocal ever, in terms of a record. So anyway, I love, and so maybe that's one, I would say that the singles definitely uplift this record. Maybe I'm being a little biased, but I feel overall this whole album is this like sound that consumes me that I really like and so brave. So that's why it's number two for me.
All right. Good stuff. Yeah, Ultra has some of their best music. I just feel it's inconsistent, although you seem to like the whole album.
I do, but I definitely feel like I don't disagree with you that the singles are particular. Like if you're thinking about collection of best singles on a Depeche Mode record, this would, if you had said to me, "Hey Peter, tell me the best set of singles on Depeche Mode record," this ranks at being some on the very top end, which definitely helps overall. I think the singles are almost too good in a way because they're exceptional. They're really great, and some of the other songs are very good. So I think it can get lost. But I just think that sonically, as a whole statement, it works really well too.
Mhm. All right, cool beans. All right, my number two is their fourth studio album, Some Great Reward from 1984. It might be a nostalgia thing, I don't know, but this is the first Depeche Mode studio album I got soon after it came out. So I was 14 or 15. I have many fond memories tied to this. It's a killer album. Great industrial sounds and percussion. Something to Do is an urgent opener, beckoning the listener to enter DM's sexy synthetic world. Next track, Lie to Me, remains one of their best songs. It's very slinky, like dancing cobra music. Then we get People Are People, the cut that exploded Depeche Mode's popularity. It Doesn't Matter and Stories of Old are also gold. Martin Gore's Somebody, which opens side two, is very heartfelt, while Master and Servant explores sexual fantasies and politics. Blasphemous Rumors ends the album on a grim note. The song is a great dig on God, God in quotes, but the chorus is a bit anticlimactic to me. It's such a great doomy sound. The chorus takes me out a little bit. It's a little nanny nanny boo boo. I don't know. Just but it's a great song overall, and I can look past that little criticism. And the album is just fantastic. 5 stars.
Yeah, as I said, that like of the earlier Depeche Mode stuff, that is the top of the top for me. I love that record. And side two is just really, I mean, it's great. It's a really cool record where I feel like there are all these little stories going on that kind of work really well together.
True.
Just terrific. Yeah, just brilliant. Great record. So, not surprising, but I have to, I know it's cool sometimes when people rank records to not rank the obvious huge record of a group as number one because you're like, oh, I'm going to be anti that. But you have to be crazy if you don't think that Violator is not the greatest Depeche Mode record. It is arguably one of the best records ever made as well. It's just an incredible, incredible record. Um, I don't think I ranked Ultra. If I was ranking Ultra, I'd probably rank Ultra like a 4.7. But Violator would be a perfect 5.0. Um, this album, it's almost kind of crazy talking about a record that a lot of people know so well, even if you're a casual listener of music or a Depeche Mode fan that, kind of like them for a certain period. This to me was the end of the perfect album trilogy that they put out, beginning with Black Celebration. Violator, again, is we're seeing them jump as songwriters and musicians. This album just everything was working. Production's incredible. The songwriting is tremendous. Every track is really brilliant. There's nothing, I don't want to skip anything on this record. It moves me. There's a reason why it's kind of lasted. And even though it's a pop record that's electronically, driven and it's keyboard driven, it doesn't sound old or aged. It's aged, it's like an eternal record, so to speak, right? So it's cinematic, it's dark. And you know what's cool about this record, Rich, too, is I feel like it's effortlessly hooky. I don't feel like when you're listening to the record, you don't feel like they're trying hard. It just feels like it's just coming out of them. A lot of great records. Like I think about like Prince's Sign of the Times. It just feels like Prince was just writing and all this genius was coming out. Or if you think about, or you think about like Dark Side of the Moon for Pink Floyd, it just came out. Like it's just stuff. All great records do that. Um, and when I think about Depeche Mode's Violator, I feel that like they were just on this trip. Apparently, it was really like relatively easy for them to make, and it sounds that way. They were really in their brilliance, really working well off of one another. It's effortlessly hooky, right? And it's eternally cool too. It's always going to be in 20 years, it's going to be as cool as it is now. And it's really fun to listen to. Ironically, the only song that and I still think it's a genius song. It's like, if I never hear Personal Jesus again, that's fine. Only because I think also people have covered it to death and made it worse. So everyone from Nina Hagen to like Sammy Hagar has done Personal Jesus. So that tells you that no, it's true. It's like it's part of the canon, it's like a yesterday, or something like that. Like it's part of a canon. So, but it, of course, within the record, I have to hear it. But I mean, World in My Eyes, Clean, Sweetest Perfection, right? My top three are, well, my top two, I would say definitely. Policy of Truth is one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. I think the perfect, and of course, Enjoy the Silence, which was just ultra genius. It's hard to, because now it's so popular, it might be hard for people that weren't around as you and I were, Rich, when that record broke. But you remember the first time you put on, Enjoy the Silence, and you were just like, I mean, I was literally knocked out. And it goes from Enjoy the Silence into that interlude right into Policy of Truth. And I think that that may be the singular most amazing like soundscape and like musical moment on a Depeche Mode record. Inside too, you're just like you're literally rendered immobile. You're moved so much. And I thought that the video, again, I really have to say that Depeche Mode, in terms of understanding their audience and the connection of visual and audio being so crucial to what they were about. That video was just so perfect. And again, is eternal. Like you watch a video, like that's exactly what the video should be. It's just it's married so beautifully and just really terrific. But yeah, I mean, Violator it's one of those records that people say is talked about. Maybe people say it's overrated. It certainly is not. I think it's one of those records that sold a lot, and I would probably say it should have even sold more because it's really a tremendous piece of work. And what I love about it is that Depeche Mode just were brilliant and everyone got on their boat. It's not like they changed course. They were going this way, and just everyone else, it's like the audience caught up with them at their moment of brilliance. So this ends to me the Trinity, but it really set the template of saying like this is what music and art is really supposed to do. It's supposed to move you emotionally. And I think that this record just does a perfect job of it. So yeah, and I always tell people, even when people say, "Really, should I just get if I don't know Depeche Mode, what should I get?" I'm like, "You have to just get Violator, and then and then kind of search it out." But a record that really deserves all the hype and all the praises put on it. That's my
Yeah.
number one. That's my 5.0 right there.
Yeah, of course, it's my number one as well. It's their seventh album. It's from 1990. Yeah, every track on Violator is 5 stars, full of amazing sounds and effects. Opening track, World in My Eyes, is so inviting as the singer informs his lover, nothing more than you can feel now. That's all there is. Second track, Sweetest Perfection, is sensuous, but also dark and seedy, a bit grimy. Then we get Personal Jesus, which is just addictive. I love the electronic percussion elements and the different segments of the song. But Halo, Waiting for the Night, Enjoy the Silence, all among their very best songs. And Policy of Truth, yeah, that might be my favorite. Just just dig it so much. I love the way the synths bend in weird ways. Each track is loaded with ear candy, many things to listen to at once. So yeah, not only Depeche Mode's best, but one of the best albums ever made. Gotta say. All right, did you do a top 10 songs?
I did. This was, can I tell you, the records were a thing. The songs were, there was a point where I was like, I can't do this. What is Rich asking me to do? Because there were so many, and I
Yeah.
kept, questioning and whatever. So what I did was I just I did a top 10. Of course, a lot of it may change like on depending on the day and whatever, but I just tried to grab songs I felt like I loved and I felt represented like a lot of Depeche Mode. That was how I did it. So, yeah, how do you want to do this? Do you want to go 10 to 10
I
or
think
you
we can. I was just going to list mine off,
Yeah,
not really say anything about them. You can talk about them if you want, but I'm just going to list mine off um, and mention the album each song is from.
So yeah, so
Um,
I think I mentioned a lot of these songs anyway, so I'll just go through my top 10 Depeche Mode tracks. I think like if I was trying to get someone, I thought this like if I was trying to get someone into Depeche Mode, what would be 10 songs that I think really work? So number 10 would be Love in Itself. Number 9 would be Everything Counts. Number 8 is Blasphemous Rumors. Number 7 is Black Celebration. Number 6 is Ghosts Again. Number 5 is Never Let Me Down Again. Number 4 is Policy of Truth. Number 3 is Wrong. Number 2 is Home. And number 1 is Enjoy the Silence.
all right, amazing list. And of course, us fans know which albums those belong to. So I'll go ahead and mention the albums anyway, since I have them written down here.
Sure.
But my top 10, my number 10 is Never Let Me Down Again from Music for the Masses. Number 9 is Precious from Playing the Angel. Number 8 is Heaven from Delta Machine. Number 7 is Lie to Me from Some Great Reward. That also could have been It Doesn't Matter. Number six, I've got Policy of Truth from Violator. Number five, In Your Room from Songs of Faith and Devotion. Number four is Strange Love for Music for the Masses. Number three, But Not Tonight, the last song on my old Black Celebration LP. I guess you'd say it's the B-side of Stripped. Number two, Fly on the Windscreen. Again, that's the catching up with Depeche Mode version. And my number one is It's No Good from Ultra.
I love that you picked that. I had some honorable mentions also, but and one of them you picked, It's No Good, was one of my honorable mentions, which I was like, okay, I have to just say this. But I had another few. I had like Dream On. I also had Strange Love, but Not Tonight. Also, Question of Time, Walking in My Shoes, and Stripped. But it's funny because a lot of our singles are similar. But yeah, I love that song as well. It's a
Yeah.
great pick.
Yeah, there it was hard to narrow it down, but I managed to do so. So, any final thoughts about Depeche Mode before we sign off?
I just, what was great, Rich, I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. It was really, I always say Depeche Mode are one of my favorite groups, but to really be able to sit down and to go through their catalog and of 15 albums over, a 40-year period or just over 40 years was really tremendous and fun and really insightful because sometimes, people say, oh, this is my favorite group. And then you kind of listen back and you start to realize, oh, there's some of these records are maybe not as great as I remember them, or I just kind of like I let them slide a bit. What's great is that Depeche Mode to me never really like music was always at the heart of what they were about. And I think that they did something and have done something that they've left a discography that's really momentous in its scope and its like development from their early years and their first record, Speak and Spell, all the way through Memento Mori, that there's weight and gravitas to the music. And it's very powerful and means a lot to them. It means a lot to us as listeners as a result. So like I really feel that they're one of the few artists that really there's any you can kind of enter in any period, any wormhole and kind of find gold there, which is really tough to say. I think before we were talking, I said there's like a few artists I can think that do that, but Depeche Mode as a group doing that is tremendous. And the idea that also I think it's so unusual that they literally start out as four and now there's just two of them making music. I really do hope that they continue to do something. Although if they ended with Memento Mori, I can understand why. But I'm kind of confident that because of how important they are, that they're still gonna make brave records. And I'm pretty convinced that especially with the last few albums they've done that they have a lot more in the gas tank unlike a lot of other groups that make records that kind of sit on their reputation and maybe have a couple of really cool songs but the whole records are like whatever. I feel what I love about Depeche Mode is I could tell that even if there were some records I liked less, I never got the sense that they were phoning it in ever. Even at their emotional, when they were dealing with some really heavy emotional stuff, they put that in the music and they really had a devotion and a respect for listeners that were going to make things that matter to us. And hopefully you'll get some of the trips and some of them you won't get as much. But I feel that they make such important music and it's really wonderful to listen back. As an artist and a musician myself, my reverence is like, is off the chart for them.
Yeah, well, I've got nothing to add to that. That's a perfect summation. I do think they're one of the greats. Um, so yeah, Depeche Mode. Before we go, can you show off your record collection again? I just think it's so amazing.
Well, I'll show you a little bit of it. So this is like one
Yeah.
the corner. It turns there a bit,
Uh,
and then it kind of goes this way as well. Uh,
uh,
yeah, and there's like records hiding here, and my closet's full of my CD closet, which is eventually going to a storage space, so I have a little more access to be able to see what's there. Is there? It's just my lifetime. That's where that's where maybe a lot of my money and my art go, but that's where that's. the idea of as a musician, I think that you always should be doing homework, right? So, and doing research and really listening and kind of getting inspired. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on around me. And that's why I was able to proudly show all the Depeche Mode records because
Mhm.
I think it's really important that people go out and they buy those records. And Depeche Mode, what was so cool, as we talked about Rich before we went on, their album covers are fantastic. Like the artwork is great. And what was so neat is that you'd go in and you'd go in to buy the record, but then you'd see this artwork, and they weren't on the covers of virtually, I think, every record. They're not really on the cover except for Catching Up with Depeche Mode, which was a comp. So you kind of had to look in the inner sleeves, sometimes catch these cool artsy photos of them. And they were very much trying to say to you, hey, this is a statement, this is art. And so being a person that listens to vinyl, I really appreciate that. And that's why as I get older, I love that they still put out their records on vinyl and it's really wonderful and they take time out with the artwork. It just creates a whole different experience, and kind of a connection with the band.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I got the right man for this video. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thanks
I
for having me, Rich. I appreciate it.
I really enjoyed this, and thanks for everyone for watching. Peace. Y'all have a good one.